The Paisios of Mount Athos, Spiritual Counsel, Volume 4, Family Life, Part 5, The Trials in Our Life, Chapter 2, Illness. Yeronda, what is the meaning of the expression good paradise? It means to have a good journey into paradise. Yeronda, can it mean to go to the good paradise? Have you ever heard of people talking about a bad paradise? In any case, for one to go to sweet paradise, he must taste much bitterness here in this life and have the passport of tribulations in hand. Look at what happens in the hospitals, what tragic dramas, what pain people endure. How many mothers, the poor things, undergo surgery or procedures while thinking of their children and being concerned about the entire family. How many family men have cancer, undergo radiation therapy, and what troubles they have. They can't go to work, but they still have to pay the rent and so many other bills. Others who have their health have a hard time making ends meet, so you can imagine how much more difficult it must be not to have your health and to force yourself to work in order at least to meet your obligations. I am so worn out by the problems of people. I hear so many things each day. Constantly there are troubles, difficulties, bitterness in the mouth all day long and in the evening. I lie down to rest without having eaten. Although I feel bodily tired, I also feel inwardly rested. Yeronda, does illness always help people? Yes, it always helps a lot. Illnesses help people to find the mercy and forgiveness of God. Footnote. The Greek term exiliasis in Orthodox theology does not have the legalistic notion of atonement of Western theology, but expresses rather the merciful and loving activity of God to instruct and guide the sinful person toward the goal of salvation. End footnote. When they do not have virtues. Health is a great gift, but the good provided by illness cannot be had through health. It is a spiritual good. It is a very great benefaction, very great. It cleanses us from sin, and sometimes even earns us wages. The soul of a person is like gold, and illness is like the fire which purifies it. You see, even Christ said to St. Paul, "My strength is made perfect in weakness." 2 Corinthians 12:19. The more one suffers trials and tribulations through illness, the more he is purified and sanctified as long as he is patient in his illness and accepts it with joy. Some illnesses need only a little patience, and God permits them in order to give a person some wages and to take away some of his shortcomings. This is because a physical illness can aid the healing process of a spiritual illness. The spiritual ailment is neutralized by the humbleness brought on by the physical illness. God utilizes all things for good. Everything that he permits is for our spiritual advantage. He knows what each one of us needs, so he provides an illness for us, either for us to be rewarded or for us to pay off some debt of sins. How is your mother? She is not well, Yeronda. She develops a high fever for a period of time, and then she loses consciousness. Her skin is covered with sores, and during the night she is in pain. You know, such people are martyrs, if not total martyrs, at least half. Her entire life, Yeronda, was one long tribulation. Consequently, her reward will be doubled. She has so much to receive. She has paradise secured. When Christ sees that someone can endure a serious illness, he gives it, so that, with just a little tribulation in this life, a person can be rewarded greatly in the heavenly, the eternal life. One suffers here, but will be rewarded in the other life, because there is a paradise, there is also a reward. Today, a woman who had been undergoing kidney dialysis treatments for years told me, "Father, please bless my arm. The veins are full of sores and I cannot have my dialysis." I told her, "In the other life, these sores will be diamonds with far greater value than the diamonds of this world. How many years have you been having dialysis?" 12, she told me. Then I added, "You are entitled to a reduced pension and a pension bonus paid at once." Then she showed me a wound in the other arm and told me, "Father, this wound is not healing and the bone is visible." "Yes, but through that wound you can see heaven," I reassured her. "Be of good courage. I pray that Christ increase your love for him, such that you forget your pain. Of course, there is also the other entreaty to take away the pain, but then the great reward is also taken away. Therefore, the former entreaty is better." The poor woman was consoled. When the body is tested, then the soul is sanctified. With an illness, we experience pain in our body, our earthen home. But this is how our soul, the landlord, rejoices eternally in the heavenly palace prepared for us by Christ. With this spiritual logic, which sounds rather irrational for worldly people, I, too, rejoice in and am proud of my physical wounds. The only thing that I do not think about is having a heavenly reward. I understand that I pay off my ingratitude to God, since I have not responded to his great gifts and benefactions. For in my life, everything is a festival, both the monastic life and the illnesses I am going through. God is constantly providing acts of philanthropy and economy for me. But pray that he does not simply pay me off with these in this life, for then, alas, I will be lost. Christ would do me great honor if I could suffer even more for his love, as long as he strengthens me to endure, and then I would not want a reward. A person who is completely healthy is not really well. It would be better if he had some health problem. Speaking for myself, I benefited more from my illness than I had benefited from all the ascetic struggle I had carried out until then. This is why I say that if a person has no obligations, he should prefer an illness rather than total health. He owes a debt because of his health, but because of an illness, when endured with patience, he will have something to receive. When I was in the Cenobitic monastery, footnote, the elder was a monk in the holy monastery of Esfigmenou, Mount Athos, during the years 1953 to 1955, a very old saintly bishop named Erotheos, who was living ascetically in the skeet of St. Anna, came to visit. At the time of his departure, as he was mounting his animal, his trousers were pulled, revealing his swollen legs. The fathers who went to help him saw the swollen legs and were horrified. He realized why they were horrified and said, "These are the best gifts given to me by God. I pray that he will not take them away." When we are visited by some illnesses, It is good to give ourselves over to Christ unconditionally. We must keep in mind that our soul has greater need of patience and glorifying God in times of pain than a strong as steel body with which we may be able to carry out amazing physical feats, but which may also cause us to brag without even realizing it, because we will think that it was by our sword that we gained paradise. Do you know how many years I have endured bearable pain and sometimes unbearable pain? The bearable pain is a permanent condition. First, I suffered from bronchiectasis, and later from the operation I had. After that, my long history of intestinal problems began. Following that, I spent half a year with severe pain from a herniated disc. During this time, I could not even do prostrations, and I had difficulty taking care of myself, not to mention serving the people who continued to come. Following this, a hard lump appeared in my belly, and I was told it was a hernia. Whenever I got tired, it would hurt and swell. One day, on the eve of St. Panteleimon, it was swollen and hurting, but I had to go to the skeet for the all-night vigil. I said to myself, I will go, come what may, because I had to go. During the vigil, it crossed my mind to sit down a little, but then I thought, if I put down the stall seat to sit, everyone else will do the same, and so I preferred not to sit at all. After the 12 hours of the vigil, I imagined that the hernia would worsen. When I returned to my keli, I had barely gotten in when the little bell rang. Father, open up. I heard someone calling. I smiled and thought, good, now we will go non-stop. In fact, more and more people came that day. In the evening, when I had finished with everyone, I realized that the pain had completely gone away. The next day, when I had rested, it appeared again. After that, it would both bother me and hurt me, but I would even admire it. Since Christ knew about the pain, he also knew that it helped me, which was the reason why he allowed it. This went on for 5 years. Do you have any idea of how difficult it was? And what happened later when you had problems with your legs? That was something else. I couldn't stand up. When people came to visit, I had to force myself to stand up. That went away, only for the hemorrhaging to begin. They told me it was ulcerative colitis. That was yet another story, another 7 years with bleeding and pain. But do not worry, only pray for the health of my soul. I am happy that God has honored me and given me this gift, and I do not want him to take it away. Glory be to God. He allowed it in order that I be helped in this way. This is how we take our examinations in patience. Now this, later that. For you have need of patience. Hebrews 10:36. For if we, who have a little fear of God, do not have patience to endure, what will those in the world do? But I do see many lay people who outdo us monks in virtue. My parents told me that when the people of Farasa got sick, they would not run for a cure immediately to the Haji Fentis. Footnote, this is how the residents of Farasa used to call Saint Arsenius of Cappadocia after his pilgrimage to the Holy Land. Haji Fentis is a compound word from Haji meaning pilgrim and Ephentis meaning person with authority. They first endured the pain as much as I could with philotimo and patience, for they considered suffering to be a blessing. They would reason, let me torment my soul a little for the sake of Christ, since he suffered greatly to save me. They would go to Haji Ephentis to heal them only when they saw their work falling behind and their families suffering. Do you see what great philotimo they had? If those lay people had thought that way and had such patience, how am I, the monk, supposed to think? Christ said, "In your patience possess you your souls," Luke 21:19. You see, God was not as pleased with the charity of Job when he had all of his great wealth as he was with his patient endurance during the time of his tribulations. Yeronda, when you say that a sick person is patiently enduring his illness, do you mean that he does not show at all that he is in pain? Only in the final need may he let others become aware of it. He may say that he is hurting, but not to what degree. For if he does not make it at all known to others, they may in some way be scandalized by some of his behavior. For example, if a monk is ill and suffering from something and cannot attend the worship service, then someone may be harmed by not having good thoughts about the monk's absence. Yeronda, what pain do you consider unbearable? The pain that makes tears run from our eyes. These tears are not the tears of repentance, nor the tears of joy. Where do they belong? What do you think? Are they not the tears of martyrdom, Yeronda? Exactly, they are the tears of martyrdom. Yeronda, when I have severe pain, it is difficult for me to say, "Glory to you, O God." Why do you have this difficulty? Think of the suffering and pain of Christ, beating, reviling, whipping, and crucifixion. And he endured everything. He had done no violence, neither was there any deceit in his mouth. Isaiah 53:9. For our salvation, and you, when you are in pain, should say, "For the sake of your love, O Christ, I will endure." Yeronda, what is needed to get beyond the pain? Manliness, forcefulness is needed. And how does one face unbearable pain? If he is a worldly man, with a song, and if he is a spiritual man, with psalmody, the chanting of hymns. Once my father had a high fever and a severe headache. What did he do? He ate a salty sardine, drank a glass of wine, and began singing the song "Awake, O Unfortunate Slave," and other old songs from pre-revolution times of 1821, and he got well. We too ought to chant hymns to dispel the pain. One day I caught a cold and had a very severe headache that made my head feel ready to break open. I started chanting a very pleasant hymn, and my headache went away. Indeed, the chanting of psalms and hymns together with saying the Jesus Prayer helps a great deal in such circumstances. They relieve the soul. They make it sweet because constant pains and sorrows wear it down and make it cold. Just last night I couldn't sleep because of the pain. I said to myself that if I do not see the morning and die, I will wake up to a great day. In the other life there will be no evening and no dawn. Then I took a pill. I chanted the hymn, "The Sufferings of Your Saints." Footnote, the Apollyticon of the hymn, the Apollyticon hymn of the Holy 40 Martyrs, whose commemoration is on March the 9th. Through the sufferings of your saints, which they did endure for your sake, be moved, O Lord, and all our infirmities cure. You, O lover of man, we implore you. End footnote. This pill is active all night long. Do the doctors have such a pill here? Yeronda, people say that pain intensifies at night. Yes, at night one becomes somewhat heavy and more sensitive to pain. Besides, in the daytime the sick have some company. They talk, they're active, and they somehow forget their pain. At night, when they're alone, their mind dwells on the pain, and they imagine sometimes that the pain has intensified. In sickness there will be pain, but we must turn the knob to another frequency to forget it. For if one does not face pain the right way, he will have double the pain. If you are thinking of the pain, it will be doubled. but with one good thought, as when, for example, you remember those who are suffering more than you, or you chant a little, the pain can be forgotten, even when it doesn't go away altogether. Yet under pain is usually a warning that something is happening to our body. Once it comes, what attention should it be given? One must test his endurance and accordingly be careful. This is particularly important when we are at an advanced age. For an old automobile cannot continue to race as it did when it was new, otherwise the tyres will fly off here, the carburetor will be left back there. During the time I had pain in my back, I could not do my Jesus prayer with the Comboschini standing up. The moment I felt a little better, I started doing it standing up again with great prostrations, and the pain came back. I sat down for a while, then I said, let me try again. Again, the same thing happened. After that, I didn't go on, but at least my conscience was at ease. Yet under a pain, which I know does not affect the rest of my body, does not worry me, but when the pain indicates some serious harm, then it worries me. Look, pain in the back, for example, may not affect our bodily systems, but it can certainly immobilize our entire body, whereas the body can somehow endure other pains. Yet when the body suffers, does the soul also suffer? When the driver is sick, the car can't go racing down the road. The soul suffers when the body is in pain. Do you understand? The soul lacks the disposition it would otherwise have when the body is well. In a way, the soul is also ill when the body is ill. Yet does pain make people become wild? When people do not face pain in a spiritual way, it can make them become wild. But when they face it in a spiritual manner, they can then become serene and experience divine consolation, and then the illness becomes a festival. One can rejoice in being numbered among the confessors and the martyrs. The holy martyrs would forget the pain because their love for Christ, which was greater than the pain, neutralized it. Does the person who does not face pain in a spiritual way become purified? If he is a lay person, he can be purified. If he is a monk, he cannot be purified. When a person shares in the pain of his fellow human beings, God, in a way, is moved over this and rejoices, because this person, through the love he demonstrates, is akin to God, who grants him divine consolation. Otherwise, he would not be able to bear the pain of his fellow human beings. Yet how can you feel the pain of others? When you, too, are in pain, you think of the other's pain. You put yourself in his place and feel his pain all the more. In other words, your own pain helps you to understand the pain of others. And when you accept your own pain with joy, you can give consolation to those who are suffering. In any case, it is one thing to learn that someone is sick and quite another when you yourself are sick. Only then can you understand the sick person. I used to hear about chemotherapy and imagined that it was some sort of therapy using the medicinal qualities of fruit juices and natural foods. Footnote, the Greek text uses two terms, chemotherapia for chemotherapy and chemotherapia for therapy with fruit juices. End footnote. How could I have known? But now I have come to understand what a devastating process it is. Yet which therapy is more difficult, chemotherapy or radiation therapy? More difficult? Everything, both the radiation therapy and the chemotherapy is. The worst thing is that they cut off your appetite. While you have to eat well, you cannot eat at all, and the doctors advise you must eat. Well, how can you eat when all those things take away not only your appetite, but also your energy and make you feel like a corpse? When I had radiation therapy, I felt like I was burning, but I could not drink any water at all. I felt like vomiting and detested even the water. Footnote, these comments were made in June of 1994, 1 month before the falling asleep of the elder at the end of his 8-month ordeal with cancer. End footnote. Yeronda, what if you had done the surgery a little earlier? Why earlier? I do not pray that my illness pass in order to suffer with those who are suffering. I now understand far more those who are suffering and share in their pain. Also, it helps me spiritually. I only ask to be enabled to serve myself and others, but the will of God be done. When you have a certain problem with your health and it does not preoccupy you, then, in a way, you have the right to ask God to improve the health of others. But even he who does not have a health problem of his own can at least sympathize with and share the pain of those who do. Let me take up your burden, is what the people of Farasa said to one another in order to express their sympathy and pain for others' pain, worries, or bitterness. Yeronda, just how did they take up the burden of others? With love. When someone says with love, let me carry your burden, then he does. But once he takes it, then it demands a great deal of patience, great manliness, much strength in order to face it appropriately. Some people come and tell me, Yeronda, I want to take up your burden. Some, of course, say it with manliness and are ready to face the consequences, but others who are easily frightened do not really know what they are saying. Such weak souls will run to the doctor with the slightest provocation and become easily disillusioned. They can hardly bear their own little burden, and yet say they will carry mine. It would be better for them to be patient with their own pain, to accept with joy whatever God permits for them, and not to seek, supposedly out of love, to take on the illness of another. For if by chance God fulfills their request, and they forget that they themselves requested it, they will grumble and may even blame God himself. Last night, as I was going to church for the vigil, I noticed in the corner a father with a child in a wheelchair. I approached the child, hugged him and kissed him. You're an angel, I told him, do you know it? And to the father I said, it is a great honor for you to be serving an angel. Be joyful for this, for both of you will have a place in paradise. Their faces lit up with joy, for they felt a divine consolation. Those who minister to the sick and disabled with love and patience will erase the record of their sins with the sacrifice they are making, and if they do not have sins, they are being sanctified. Once a woman related some events in her life which were rather amazing. I was puzzled because they were conditions we usually find in the lives of the saints, and she was just a simple woman. When she told me how she had passed most of the years of her life, I realized that her entire life was one of sacrifice. From a young age, she took care of sick people, as in her paternal home there also lived the grandfather and the grandmother who were elderly and sick and had to be taken care of. When she got married, she lived with her in-laws who were also sick. Later, her husband got sick and was bedridden, so she took care of him. In other words, this woman went through her entire life ministering to sick people. All through these years, she yearned to study, to go to a vigil, but never had time. But because she was justified, God in the end gave her his grace all at once. Yeronda, when some people get sick, they acquire many peculiarities. Yes, this does happen, but the healthy should excuse the agitation, the complaining, or other peculiarities of the sick, for these are natural developments of the illness. Specifically, anyone who has not been sick cannot understand the sick person, for he has not experienced pain, and his heart is a little hard. Those who minister to a sick person, someone confined to a bed, need to be very careful not to make that person groan. They may be caring for the person for years, but if they make him groan in despair just once at the end of his life, they lose everything. It is a serious matter for the soul to depart this life with a sigh or a groan. However, those who made the sick person groan will later be tormented by the devil, who supposedly refines their conscience. Ironda, when caring for a sick person, it is not only the weariness that gets to you, but also the sadness as you look upon a loved one gradually fading away. Yes, but God provides for all. You see, when one member of a family becomes ill, the whole family is affected and feels his or her pain. And if it is the father who gets sick and can't work, then the entire family not only feels the pain, but also experiences misfortune. They agonize, will our father live or die? He is tormented, and all the others in the family are tormented as well. He fades away. Others around him also fade. Then the mother has to take on more work. She must take care of the children, go to the hospital and look after the sick person. In other words, when someone becomes sick with a serious illness, he himself suffers, tires, and often wishes to die. But his family members who care for him also worry over him, suffer hardships, and become tired. And the closer and more loving the family is, God will allow, in the end, for the sick person and those who minister to him to suffer even more, to feel even more pain, until they reach the point of saying, "May God take him, that he may rest," and that they too may rest. You see, when a family is very united in love, and the parents die suddenly without an illness, and neither the parents nor their children suffer, because the children didn't need to take care of the parents, the pain of separation becomes very grievous for the children. Ironda, how much can emotions affect physical health? When someone is not distressed, the physical pain is lessened. When one is distressed, the unhealthy mental condition adversely affects the health of the body. Take a cancer patient whom the doctors have written off. If he believes in God and finds himself in a joyful spiritual environment, he may live longer. However, under different circumstances, he may waste away from worry and despair within a few weeks. Sometimes a person can be healthy from a medical point of view. His tests do not show anything, but if he has something which disables him emotionally, then he may not be really healthy. For most illnesses begin because of some sort of worry. All people have some sensitive point. Distress will strike one person in the stomach, another in the head. The best medicine for an illness is spiritual joy because it pours divine grace into the soul. Spiritual joy has the greatest healing power for all illnesses. It is the divine salve which heals the wounds, while worry irritates them. Ironda, if someone has a very serious illness and decides to commit himself to God, will he be doing the right thing? If he has no responsibilities, he can do whatever he wants. But if he does have responsibilities, this will also depend on others. I too went to the doctor involuntarily and without my will. But if I had not gone for that simple examination which the doctor conducted, my intestine would have become completely blocked. In that case, I would have taken some liquid nourishment for a while and then goodbye, everything would have ended. He said, one simple examination, and that got the ball rolling. CAT scans here, cardiologists there. Now the white blood platelets are down, now they are up, incisions, sutures, and in the end, what came of it all? As is apparent, I will be staying here. Usually we say the sick must first see to it that they get all the help they can, and when they're exhausted all human help, they should turn to God for help. But we must not forget that in order to receive human assistance, one who is suffering from a serious illness has to go through a great ordeal, a virtual martyrdom. They have to do so many tests, operations, transfusions, chemotherapies, radiation treatments. Then you have injections for transfusions, injections for the liquid medications. Then you have veins collapsing, tube feedings through the nose, inability to sleep. And all these things take place just to do that which is humanly possible. Do you understand? It is not a simple matter like, for example, an infected wound with pus where once the pus is removed and the wound is healed. These are complicated procedures, which is why we should not take comfort in saying that a patient is in the hands of good doctors. Instead, we must keep in mind that for a patient to be helped medically, he must undergo an entire ordeal, and we should be praying that Christ will give him the patience to go through it all. We must also pray for the doctors to be enlightened and do the right thing, for they can make mistakes, especially if they are not humble. You see, when the house falls apart, the homeowner cannot stay in it. The same is true with the owner of the body, the soul. It cannot stay if the house, the body, falls apart. And these days, efforts are made to keep the homeowner in his health with iron and with steel, with the use of vitamins A, B, C, that is to say, to help the sick with the use of scientific knowledge. But not everyone can be helped with the aid offered. Instead, their life is simply extended for a period of time, or rather their pain is extended, for scientific knowledge is not enough. You also need faith and prayer. Sometimes I see, even here at the monastery, the sisters who are doctors want to help the patient more with their scientific knowledge rather than with their trust in God and with prayer. But the prayer of the heart will grant them a higher medical degree because they will put an end to the human science. When love with pain is cultivated for all people in general, then the divine powers are energized as long as there is profound humility in the soul, and one does not become prideful by usurping such powers from God and imagining that they are his own. We must also not forget that Christ can cure whatever cannot be cured by the doctors. For this to happen, there must be a good reason, and the believer must be very faithful and wholly given to Christ. In other words, Yoronda, are you saying that people who suffer should not seek medical help? I do not mean that, my child. I'm not saying don't give him oxygen that he may choke to death. What I'm talking about is the ordeal an ill person goes through just to get some human assistance. And I'm also trying to say that we should pray that Christ will help ill people so that they don't have to go through those ordeals. If the illness is very serious, we should pray that Christ take away the illness with just one of his loving caresses. For if Christ caresses the patient gently on the arm, everything can go away and the patient will be healed. After that, there is no need for medicine or for bitter ordeals. And if he should caress their face, it is even better. Now, if he should give them a hug, it will even soften their heart. Do you understand? All of this requires great faith, however. If the patient himself does not have faith, he does not recover. Yet onto this sick child brought by his parents today is suffering a great deal. Well, he will gradually recover, but a certain sensitivity will remain to remind him of his illness, and this sensitivity will be spiritually helpful to the child. Little children who have leukemia, Yoronda, also suffer a great deal. These children are helped greatly through Holy Communion. Many children have gotten through their illness with Holy Communion. When we read Psalm 145, footnote St. Arsenius, a Cappadocian, would read Psalm 145 for this purpose, with which we ask God to stop the bleeding, let us also pray that God will help the little children with leukemia and provide the necessary blood in the hospitals for the children with Cooley's anemia. These children go through a greater martyrdom than the children killed by Herod. Refer Matthew 2:16. Little children receive a full reward from undergoing the ordeal of their illness, for they do not have sins. We shall see so many little children in the other life in the angelic order of martyrs, comprised of those martyred infants. Infants who are only 2 months old have injections, operations, treatments. How are the nurses to find a vein in these little angels? They are injected here, injected there, and just to see a little child with a head tumor receiving radiation treatment, to see those long wires attached to his tiny head, this is more than anyone can bear. A grown person can hardly bear such pain. How can a little child go through it? Yeronda, in the end, do these children get cured or do they die? Well, many of them die, but how can the parents let them go? Yeronda, is it a worthwhile effort for pediatricians to try to keep premature babies alive? The doctors must try to do everything they can to save them, but at the same time they must pray for them as well. They can pray, my God, if this child is to live and suffer all his life, then I beseech you, please take him. The doctors must also arrange for the baptism of these infants, and then they will greet the doctor's arrival in paradise with lit candles. And when the children are older, the doctors must be careful about how they will inform them of the diagnosis. A doctor told an 8-year-old, "You will go blind." The father came and told me in front of the child. We took him to specialists abroad, and they told us that the child will become blind. Even if the child is well, the worry over such a report can strike a terrible blow at some sensitive point. How much more so when the child is sick? If we ask something from God without making any sacrifice, it has no virtue. It has no value. If I sit and say, "God, please heal this person," without making some sacrifice, it's as though I'm just uttering good words. If I make some sacrifice, God will recognize my love and say, He will fulfill my request. Christ will recognize my love, and then He will fulfill my request, if indeed this is for the spiritual good of the other. This is why when people ask you to pray for some sick person, you should tell them to pray too, or at least to struggle to break their bad habits. Some people come to me and say, "Father, make me well. I've heard that you can help me." But they want to be helped without any effort on their part. For example, you advise someone, "Do not eat sweets. Just make this small sacrifice and God will help you." And they respond, "Why? Can't God help me without that?" If they make no sacrifice for their own sake, how will they sacrifice anything for someone else? On the other hand, there are people who will not eat sweets, so Christ can help those who suffer from diabetes, or some who don't sleep, so Christ may grant a little sleep for those who suffer from insomnia. These people become akin to God, and then God grants His grace. When someone tells me that he cannot pray for a person he knows is sick, I tell him to make a sacrifice for the sick person. Usually I tell him to do something which will be good for his own health too. A father from Germany once came to the Kalevi and told me about his daughter who was in the early stages of paralysis. The doctors had decided nothing more could be done for her. The poor father was completely hopeless. I told him, "Make a sacrifice for your child. You cannot do prostrations and you cannot do prayer, that's fine. How many cigarettes do you smoke per day?" 4.5 packs, he admitted. "Smoke only 1 pack and give the money you save as charity to some poor person," I told him. "Let my child get well, Father, and I'll stop smoking altogether," he told me. "But then that sacrifice will have no value. You must stop smoking now. Throw those cigarettes away," I urged him. "Don't you love your child?" "Me not love my child? For the love of my child, I'd jump out of a 5th-floor window," he then exclaimed. "I'm not telling you to throw yourself down from the 5th floor. I'm just telling you to throw the cigarettes away. If you do a foolish thing like jumping out of a 5th-floor window, your child will be left unprotected in the streets and you'll lose your own soul. I'm telling you to do something easy. Here, right now, throw away your cigarettes." There was no way he would get rid of his cigarettes, and in the end he left, crying with his cigarettes in hand. How can such a person be helped? Those who do listen and follow some advice can truly be helped. Another day a man came in puffing heavily from having walked. I gathered that he was a heavy smoker and told him, "My blessed man, why do you smoke so much? You will harm your health." As soon as he got his breath and was able to speak, he said, "My wife is very sick and in danger of dying. Please pray for a miracle to happen. The doctors have given up." "Do you love your wife?" I asked him. "I love her," he told me. "Then why don't you also do something to help her? She did whatever she could. The doctors did whatever they could. And now you come here to ask me also to do something and to pray for God to help her. But what have you done to help your wife?" "What can I do, Father?" he asked me. "If you stop smoking, your wife will become well again," I told him. I thought to myself that if God sees that it will not be spiritually advantageous for the wife to be healed, then the husband at least would be spared the harm caused by smoking. After a month had passed, he came back happy to thank me. "Yoronda, I quit smoking," he told me, "and my wife as well." After a period of time, he returned in distress to tell me that he had started smoking again secretly and that his wife had again become seriously ill. "You know the medicine," I told him. "Quit smoking." "Yoronda, we were asked to tell you to pray for a sick little child, and they want to know if he will get well. What shall we tell them?" "Tell them this: the elder will pray for the child. Christ loves the child and will do whatever is good for him. If he sees that the child will become better when he grows up, he will hear my prayer. But if he sees that the child will not be in a good spiritual condition later on, then, because he loves him, he will take the child. Ask, and it shall be given to you. But God will give an answer to my prayer if I am already given to God. Otherwise, why should he give me life, just to go astray? Whether a sick person lives or dies, I still rejoice for the opportunity to pray for him." Yoronda, is it a good thing to pray for our health? It is better when we seek God's help to liberate us from our passions. In other words, we should first seek the kingdom of God. If we beseech God to heal us, we are consuming our heavenly property. But when we are unable to endure the pains of our illness, then we can ask God to heal us, and he will act accordingly. Yoronda, whether or not a sick person will benefit from the prayer we do also depends on what the patient himself is asking from God. Is that right? The sick person who also asks God to heal only him and does not pray for the health of other sick persons does not do well. You, sister, when you were in the world and working in the hospital, what did you do when the sick people What did you do when the sick people were not able to say the Jesus prayer? I said it for them, Yoronda. Yes, for you that is good, but the patient must also say some prayer. He too said prayerfully, "O my Panagia, save me." But Yoronda, isn't our perseverance in enduring the pain of illness a form of prayer? Yes, exactly, it is that too. When someone asks you to pray for him, for on such and such a day and time he will enter a hospital for surgery, you must begin praying from the time you are asked. Don't wait until he enters the operation room to pray. In church services, when the priest says, "Let us pray for those who are lying in sickness," respond by saying, "Lord, have mercy," with pain in your heart. But if you wait to hear the pitch pipe play do in order to say a musical "Lord, have mercy," your mind will be on the pitch do and on the tune, and the poor sick people who are suffering will be waiting for a little help from you. They have their pain. You, who do not have pain, ought to pray for them with pain that they be helped. Since you are not sighing on your bed of sickness, at least sigh in your prayer for the sick. If the healthy do not do a little praying for the sick, Christ will tell them in future, you had your health and did not pray for those who are suffering. I know you not. Matthew 25:12. If we do not pray for one who is ill, the ailment will follow its natural course. But if we do pray, there is a possibility that it will change its course. This is why you should always pray for the ill.